Welcome to Truman's Town Hall with your host, Matt Truman.
Hello, this is Matt Truman. Thank you for downloading this episode. Thank you for sharing with a friend. And for all those who are riding in a vehicle right now, forced to listen to this podcast, I want to thank you especially. I got that feedback earlier this week. Someone said, hey, when I'm driving in my vehicle and I'm listening to the podcast, the people riding with me are forced to listen to Truman's Town Hall. So thank you. Guys, we have a great podcast for you today. I have two guests. Frank Wylie, resident of the city of Huber Heights and currently running for the Ward 3 seat in the city of Huber Heights. And we also have at-large City Councilman Glenn Otto discussing the city manager situation happening as we speak in the city of Huber Heights. Tuesday, the work session, there is supposed to be a discussion on the entire situation, hopefully bringing more light to what actually happened, because everyone in the city is confused. Even council members are confused. Roll the clip.
Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Lyons?
Thank you, Mayor. In the video, I do not see anyone sitting in the city manager chair. Is Scott Folkowski happen to be in the meeting tonight?
Mr. Folkowski is not here this evening.
Okay, so, and Brian Chadkowski is not here either?
No, sir.
Okay, so where are we in the contract process in offering to interim city manager Scott Folkowski?
So he has agreed to be the interim city manager.
Whoa, Mayor, how do I know that? Do I take your word for it?
Well, I guess if we appoint him and then he says no, then that would put us in another position.
No, I don't have any problems with Assistant City Manager Scott Folkowski. I think he's a delightful pick. I've worked with him for 10 years on council. I'm just wondering how far the trust can go when you say something and, whether I believe that anymore or not. And this goes back to the issue at hand. You set the agenda. There's no discussion, and you're shutting down Mr. Shaw with the discussion. And, that is your right. But in my opinion, Jeff, you perpetuated a fraud against the citizens of Huber Heights with this position we're in.
Yeah. This is enough. Yeah.
You are certainly entitled to your opinion. We are here. In fact, the video, if you go back and watch the video, at the end of the last council meeting, it was made very clear to everyone. Mr. Otto, you used the word handle, but I believe the word we gave to the law director was to execute. I believe everyone knows what the term execute means. That means take action.
Well, actually, Mayor, no.
Mr. Lyons, that was what was said. That was what was said at the meeting. The law director was directed to execute. It's on the video. When the video was done, once we were finished, and after that vote was taken, after the executive session, it was made very clear that we would hold a special meeting within 48 hours of that meeting to discuss the appointment of an interim city manager. All that is on video. All that is on record. Mr. Otto, you even leaned over to me and said, "Hey, can we take care of this pretty quick? Because I'm going out of town at the end of Wednesday. So I'd like to make sure that we can kind of wrap this up in about 10, 15 minutes." We had that discussion right here. So for you today to act like you don't know what was going on and what this meeting's about is just completely unnecessary.
That was prior to
There's been a
Mayor,
motion.
please direct your comments.
There has been
called on me, please.
I am still the presiding officer of this meeting. There has been a motion and a second. And if there is no further discussion regarding
I'm just
no further
asking
discussion,
you to direct your comments to me since I was the one that was called on.
there has been a
Now,
motion
going
and
back
a
to your
Mr.
comment
Lyons.
about execute.
Mr. Lyons, you're out of order. There has been a motion and a second to
The
discuss.
definition of execute. My understanding at the time, and the law director has communicated with me that I was in error, but my understanding of execute at the time was that this would be brought back to council to vote on. So this council, and I voted on it, just agreed to pay $150,000 for a consulting agreement based on the word execute. Now, I find that strange that that word was used, because usually when we direct the city manager or staff to negotiate a contract and then enter into a contract, they're usually low numbers. I believe one off the top of my head, former city manager, it was a copying lease and agreement, and it was for a few $1,000s, I believe. This was $150,000.
Mr. Lyons, yes, it is, you said,
was execute. So,
Mr. Lyons mentioned that it is my prerogative. I am the presiding officer of the meeting, and based on the motion, I can direct the discussion back to the meeting item at hand, and that's what we're going to do.
What we're going to do is, when things get hot and I don't want to answer any questions, I'm going to direct it back to what I... Good night, ladies and gentlemen. If you're a resident of Huber Heights, that's your mayor. That's your transparent. That's your people, not politics mayor. I'll leave it at that. Because Tuesday you have a work session. And thanks to Councilman of Ward 1, Richard Shaw, you'll be discussing this further on Tuesday. So I hope you guys show up. I hope you figure out a way to ask questions if you have them. You should be concerned about this. This is not chump change that we're talking about. And we'll talk about that further in this podcast. How about we go to, I spoke with Frank Wylie earlier this evening. Let's go to that discussion now. On the line, I have Mr. Frank Wylie. Mr. Wylie, thank you for joining Truman's Town Hall once again.
Thank you for having me.
So tonight, there was a Huber Heights City Council special meeting, and they were discussing the appointment of the interim city manager due to the exit of the, well, I guess now the former city manager. And there's just a lot of things to talk about. And for those who have already viewed the meeting, they'll understand that there's still some confusion out there, I would say. There wasn't a whole lot of transparency in my view. What's your view, Mr. Wylie?
Yeah, there's definitely seems like there's a lot more to the story there. The meeting on Monday night with the executive session, then when they came out and made the announcement, it seemed like it was probably a separation initiated by the city with a severance package. And then the Dayton Daily News came out with the story claiming that it was voluntary separation to pursue other opportunities, and there were several members of council that at that point they were interviewed by Dayton Daily that indicated that wasn't necessarily their understanding. So I went to the meeting tonight to kind of see if there were going to be any answers to a lot of questions that have been popping up all over the news media, the social media, people in person asking questions as to what actually happened there. And if you haven't watched the video, you should, because there were some very direct questions that were asked, and there weren't a whole lot of answers to those. So it really left me with more questions than I even entered there with.
And that video, I think it's up on the website, hhoh.org. I also posted it over on the Truman's Town Hall Facebook page, the podcast Facebook page, and it was shared over on Brick City Town Hall as well. So for those who haven't seen the meeting, I think if you're a resident of Huber Heights, I believe you should watch this. So
Absolutely.
now the first question, during their discussion portion, Mr. Otto spoke. So folks can go look at that. Then Mr. Shaw spoke, and they can also look at that. After that, Mr. Lyon spoke, and he made quite an accusation. He insinuated, or actually said, that there was fraud on the part of the mayor. I don't know if you heard that part or not.
Yeah, that's exactly what he had said when they were discussing where in the process they were with the contract for Scott Falkowski as the interim city manager. There was a discussion about taking the mayor's word for it, and Mr. Lyons did say that he didn't trust him anymore, and that along that way he did say he believed that he had perpetrated a fraud against the people of Huber Heights. That was a pretty heavy accusation there, and
Definitely.
I'm hoping at the work session, because that seems to be where the final agreement fell as to where this was going to be an open public discussion, that we get a little more information about what actually had transpired. Was it a separation? Was that the understanding of the council when they voted for that? Was it a resignation? And if so, why was the letter dated the day after the council meeting? And why is there the $150,000 consultation agreement in there that sounds a lot like a severance when you see that there's also a year's paid benefits going out till March of next year, all of which is being paid for by taxpayer dollars. That I think that would have deserved a bit of a discussion tonight, or allowance to amend the agenda, which happens quite frequently coming out of work sessions, and it's happened even during a regular council meeting when something's been brought up. They make a motion to amend the agenda, they add it on, then they discuss it. That didn't seem to be allowed to happen tonight.
Right. It appeared that the discussion was halted. But one thing I do want to note, that the one thing that really, one of the things that really stands out is that I watched the prior meeting to this when they all voted, all of them in favor to vote, and they discussed the severance deal, and they voted yes. And then they came back and said that they were confused about that. What are your thoughts on that? Because all of them voted, and then now they're confused. I don't understand that.
I'm not. The fact that they went into executive session, there's the discussion that happened in the closed meeting there. I have no privy to. I don't know what may have been their understanding coming out of that. They seem to come out. It was an awkward vote at the end of the executive session when they were talking about that package. There was a lot of awkward silences. It took a while to get a first and a second, and then Mr. Lyons had a very long, drawn-out pause before he voted yes, and then they went to the unanimous vote. It struck a little odd, and then tonight with the confusion that it's possible that in that executive session the discussion may have seemed to go one way about what was happening, and from the meeting tonight it was stated that, and I believe Mr. Otto said it first, and Mr. Lyons and had kind of co-signed on that, was that they believed it was a separation between the city and the city manager, which is a lot different than a resignation for other opportunities, and whereby most jobs you're required to give a notice, and unless they accept your resignation immediately, there would be a period of time where you would continue to do your job while they start to search for a replacement for you. It did have the feeling of a separation at the time, but then it's being put out there as possibly as a resignation, and that's where I know sitting in the crowd, that was a lot of the questions that were going on with us in the room was, is this a separation or is this a resignation? And if it's a separation, then severance package, which is what it feels like anyway, makes a lot more sense than if somebody's resigning to move on. Why would they pay all that money and cover your benefits if you're quitting?
Right.
It doesn't make a lot of sense. So there are a lot of questions, and there were citizens there that definitely wanted answers. I wanted answers. There were a lot of people watching online wanting answers, and we left there with more questions. And the way the discussion was kind of driven and tabled, it could have been addressed at that point. Everybody was there. There was no reason why even after they entertained the motion for the reason that the meeting was called, that they couldn't have an open discussion as was being sought.
I think a lot of folks would agree with you on that. Let me get down to a little bit. You were at the meeting.
Yes.
Did any of the council members that attended the meeting stick around to talk to residents?
Yes. After the meeting, Richard Shaw was there, Glenn Otto was there, and they were the two that really kind of stuck around to speak with the residents that were present.
Where was the mayor at this point?
He had exited with a small group of people prior to that and left.
He didn't stick around to talk with any of the residents to help alleviate some of the confusion.
He spoke to a few people out front of the building that I saw on his way out. I don't know what the nature of their conversation was, but he didn't stay in the council chambers to discuss with any of the rest of the folks that were inside.
Did anyone in it? They didn't pan out to the crowd. Was there a lot of folks there? Were there a few?
There were quite a few folks there. There were about the same amount that were there for the prior work session and council meeting.
Okay. What were Councilman Otto and Shaw? Were they talking about anything that you would like to talk with us about?
I wasn't involved in a lot of their conversations, but they were there talking to folks, and what I did kind of hear was they were trying to figure out exactly what had kind of gone on, and there were remarks about agreement between even Ed Lyons and Glenn Otto in agreement that something is wrong, and that in itself I think should speak volumes.
Right. I have a little clip from the meeting. Would you mind if I played it real quick and we could talk about that?
Sure.
Even at $15,000 then, I continued to advocate my position. In meeting minutes of that meeting, that agreement was passed without unanimous vote. That position has remained and up to including March 8th, 2021, when City Council unanimously voted to accept the resignation of Rob Schomer.
Yes, Mr. Webb.
I do apologize. I was not finished with my comments.
There is one purpose for this meeting tonight. Can we please stay on topic?
Who's running this meeting?
I am. Okay. So, Mr. Webb, I would agree. And in the rules of council, there are particular types of motions, and item number D is specific to the order of the day on that meeting, and I would agree that this topic is getting off discussion. This was a meeting specific, an emergency meeting to discuss the appointment of the interim city manager. That is the intention of the meeting this evening. And if we want to have discussions regarding how we got here, where we're going, where we've been, your misunderstanding of the vote that you agreed to, we can have that discussion at another time. But this evening we are here to discuss the interim city manager appointment by Mr. Flakowski.
Okay, so that was a clip during Mr. Shaw's comments that he was going through. It appeared that he provided a statement. He came prepared and wrote some things out. During that, Councilman Webb from Ward 2 interrupted to bring it back and away from what Mr. Shaw was trying to explain. So my question is, I guess, why do you think he would do something like that?
Well, I know that from the meeting there, Mr. Webb and Ms. Burge both were trying to keep it back to the actual motion at hand, which there was a motion on the floor and a discussion opened up. The part that was a little concerning for me was that in the middle of one council member speaking, Robert's Rules of Order should not allow for another to talk over and then have that take precedence over who was recognized on the floor. That part was a little more disconcerting. Mr. Webb's point was valid, that they were there to talk about Scott Falkowski's appointment. However, I think that interrupting another council member while they're having their discussion on that might not be the best way to do that based on Robert's Rules of Order.
What are your concerns right now?
Well, my concerns myself is that, and part of what I'm running on here is that honesty, integrity, and transparency is that there seems to be something amiss with this whole situation, and it can be cleared up with an open conversation with what's legally allowed to be discussed in employment rules and employment law, but simply kind of moving things very quickly, kind of brushing things off. And the fact that there were concerns raised at that point, and then we're going to find out at the work session from the city attorney whether or not they can walk that back or not. If it turns out there was something that we would need to be concerned about. It's an awful lot of money when you consider the $150,000 and benefits. We're talking a considerable amount of taxpayer dollars to go to a situation that even the Dayton Daily News picked up on didn't seem right.
Right.
And they haven't even received a proper response that I've seen yet as of printing today that would clear any of this up. And so it appears that we're going to have to wait almost a week to get somewhere with some answers as to whether or not this was above board, whether it was as it's being presented, or if there is more to the story that the citizens are asking for answers from the representatives from and not getting yet.
What do you think would be a good idea for citizens to do right now?
Well, as a citizen myself and hopeful city council member coming up here soon, we got to stand up and we got to hold everybody accountable. Elected officials are elected by the people. They're supposed to represent us. And if we feel that there's information that we need to ask for it. There is public records requests that are probably going on as we're speaking now, trying to get that information. But I think that if you're an elected official and you've made a decision and it is the right one, it is above board, it is fully, honest, you should be able to be transparent with why. And if it is a resignation, there's nothing to hide. If it was a separation where the city was going in a different direction, that happens. There should be no reason to hide that either. And I think that as citizens here, we should all come down to the work session, and I think we should get the answers that we're looking for. I think they should ask the questions that they've been asking on social media directly to our representatives, and hold everyone accountable to the oath of office that they took.
Do you think residents should attend Tuesday's work session?
Absolutely. That's what it's there for us to attend, as well as the regular council session. That's where a lot of the discussions occur. There's been a lot more attendance at the work sessions in the past several that I've been to, which is a great sign. It's good involvement. You get to know more about what's going on than even at the general council meeting, because most of the actual work and discussion happens on that Tuesday meeting before the Monday votes, which is why some folks, I think, have said that it feels like that meeting is kind of pre-done and rushed, because most of the discussion and work happens on that Tuesday meeting. So that has a lot of information. I attended a planning commission meeting this week as well, because they were discussing the potential development down in the corner of Taylorsville and Troy. That didn't make it out of the planning commission as presented, so I'm sure the developers will come back with some new and improved ideas that may address some of the concerns that were raised in the commission meeting. I think it's an opportunity for all of us to be involved in our local government, find out what's actually going on, not get involved in so much conjecture and opinion, and actually just see what's really transpiring and have a voice in the matter because there are citizens' comments allowed. You can come up there, you can speak your mind, ask questions. There's general comment times, and then there's specifically to agenda topics if you have a specific question about a definite object or item or topic that they put on the agenda.
So during the work session, I know they don't have a specific citizens' comments section part of the agenda. So it may be that only city council members are going to be able to be involved in this discussion. Do you think they're truly, I mean, with the lack of transparency that I think we all agree on from this meeting that we just witnessed, do you really think they're good? I would say the mayor needs to come out with a statement or something. He needs to explain to the folks exactly what happened. The ball truly falls in his court. I think there were some missed opportunities with Mr. Lyons, Mr. Otto, and Mr. Shaw with asking questions when the discussion was made during the vote of the exit of the former city manager. But ultimately, I feel, and this is just my opinion, I don't know what your thoughts are, what the folks of the city of Huber Heights thoughts are, but I think it falls on the mayor to really be more transparent than what he is, because, I mean, it was ridiculous, let's be honest, that he allowed this entire situation to get where it's at now. Something seems fishy to me, and I know a lot of other folks are talking that it's not right. So do you think the mayor should come out and actually make a statement, explain the entire situation, discuss the behind-the-scenes meetings that have went on, and for this discussion or this decision?
I think he has an opportunity here to kind of right the ship, so to speak. The work session meetings are ran at the discretion of the mayor, whether he will allow citizen comments or not. They have in the past, so there has been kind of precedent set there. But I do think that he has an opportunity here to kind of come out and set the record as straight as he can, and really kind of put folks' minds at ease. And he also has the opportunity to possibly not do that and then continue things moving forward, which I think you got to take advantage of the opportunities that you have to show that that everything is above board. And if it was, that's great. If it's not, then explain what's going on, or get the information out, because it will come out at some point eventually. So it's better to be honest with people and have an inconvenient truth than it is to kind of deceive or lie or manipulate or hide things and make people try to wonder and make up stuff on their own, which that will get legs and it'll be all bad. So I really think that between now and Tuesday, I think the mayor has an opportunity to really kind of start the healing process from this with everybody who is concerned or angry, upset, or feels violated, or, as Mr. Lyons put, feeling like there may have been a fraud perpetrated and lack of trust, to kind of rebuild rather than tear down some of the good things that have been happening lately here in Huber Heights, and get us back out of the kind of the scandal zone again.
Definitely. And I think that's what is most frustrating to folks that sit on the outside, is there doesn't have to be all of this turmoil all over the city of Huber Heights in the council chambers. But it seems like it keeps evolving. One thing would, one fire would be put out and then another erupts. Let me ask you this last question. You're running for city council. Would you like to see the interim city manager run through until next year when the new council takes office? And then you'll be able to appoint a new permanent city manager if you're elected.
I think that there's an opportunity there to allow the voters to kind of speak loud and clear who they want making that decision for them. And when it's in the middle of an election cycle, we have a primary coming up on May 4th, for a couple of the positions. My seat in particular that I'm running for as a primary, and the mayor seat as a primary, to kind of get an opportunity for the citizens to tell us who they want making that decision. It would probably be in the best interest to allow the election to run through, and then have the seated council, whoever that may end up being, be driving that bus, and that way we can be sure that the citizens have voted who they want up there to make that decision, especially if they're not so much trusting who's up there now. Or if they do trust who's up there now, they'll vote everybody up in that needs to be, and then they can make the decision at that time as well. But it'll really be the voice of the people saying who they want making that decision, rather than rushing to an end. Scott Belkowski is more than capable of doing the job. He's been the assistant city manager for a while. He's got support staff. The city staff are talented individuals. I think they can more than handle the projects and the duties coming up here to allow this election to occur all the way to fruition.
And I guess the last question would be this, the final question. With the former city manager, there was a big discussion on residency, a city manager living in the city of Huber Heights, conducting, being pretty much the chief executive of the city. Do you feel like that is important, that the new, whoever becomes, so tonight, Mr. Falkowski was voted in as the interim city manager, so whoever becomes the permanent city manager, do you believe that city manager should live and reside in the city of Huber Heights?
I know there's been a lot of discussion about this over the past several years since that was originally brought up. The original charter language did specify for that. I know there's been a lot of debate back and forth, but I just think as a common sense kind of principle that you take more ownership in a town that you reside in. You really are there 24/7, living and breathing in the community. I think you have a better pulse for kind of what's going on if you are part of the community that you're managing. So I think that even if they're going to go out in a nationwide search for a city manager, I would prefer that they would be willing to move to the community that they are representing, that they're going to be bidding contract developments for, they're going to be paying attention to citizen concerns for, and be able to be responsive and hear if anything comes up they need to be here for in a very timely fashion. But I really think that you take pride in the city that you're working for and living in, more so maybe than it's just where I go to work. So I really would, in my personal opinion, I think that they should want to move to Huber Heights if they don't live in Huber currently, and really become an integral part of this community.
Definitely. And I believe the current mayor has said, I will check my recordings from previous podcasts, but I believe he said that if this city manager were to leave, that he would prefer the new city manager to live in the city of Huber Heights. We'll try to play that later on down this podcast. Mr. Wylie, thank you for joining Truman's Town Hall.
Thank you very much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, gracing the Truman's Town Hall podcast is Mr. Glenn Otto, the at-large city councilman of the city of Huber Heights. Mr. Otto, thank you for joining us on Truman's Town Hall.
Thanks for having me, Matt. I appreciate it.
Okay, so I'm sure there are some residents that are a little confused about the current situation in the city of Huber Heights with the exit of the former city manager. And maybe we could, clear some of that stuff up. So let's go with the first question I think a lot of folks know. Why did you, Mr. Otto, vote for the resignation, exit, firing, whatever it may be at this point, of the former city manager?
Well,
because
coming into the meeting,
I'll just to preface that, there was no contract given to any of the council members at the vote. Is that correct?
That is correct. We didn't have a resignation letter. We didn't have any type of agreement, separation agreement, anything like that. Nothing like that nature was available to us. So at the time that the vote was called, it was just based on discussion that we had had. And I was under the impression that Jerry McDonald, our city attorney, was going to take care of and work up all those materials that we would need to process this and bring those back to council like we always do. That is always the process in the city, and I don't know why that wasn't the process this time around. But typically, he'll bring stuff back to us for approval after it's worked up.
Okay. During the meeting tonight, you had an objection, or what it seemed like to those of us viewing the meeting. You had an objection during the discussion to the previous meeting. Can you explain that a little bit to us?
Well, absolutely. I was just trying to really get some clarification on how this took place. Because as I said, when we went into the Monday meeting and we went into executive for discussion, without getting into it, there were matters discussed, and it was decided, where we would kind of go with this, and directing the city attorney to get this taken care of. And again, my assumption, based on history in the city and how we handle things, was that the city attorney was going to gather that information, put that stuff together, and bring it back to us for approval at a later date. More than likely, very soon, which I was assuming that a 48-hour time period. I figured we would be coming to review what he put up and approve or disapprove. And that just simply wasn't the case. You say that a lot of residents were confused. To be quite honest, I was confused as well, and there were other council members that were confused.
I've been watching a lot of meetings, and this was the first time I think that I can look back and remember that something was given to the law director to execute. That was a big word today used. That wasn't brought back to city council. Were you surprised that it wasn't brought back to city council? The contract and all this, it was just signed and out the door.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, our vote was taken on Monday night, but the resignation provided from Mr. Schomer didn't come until Tuesday. It was signed by Mr. Schomer on Tuesday, and our city attorney did not even sign anything until today.
Wow.
So basically, we took a vote on something that didn't exist, in my opinion.
Exactly.
Which is why I had the assumption that we would be getting something brought back to us for our review, because there was nothing given to us at that time. Those things did not exist.
Are residents reaching out to you concerned about this situation?
My phone has been going nonstop for the past couple of days. I've had phone calls, texts, PMs, you name it. It doesn't stop. People are very, very upset about it. They're very confused about it.
Without giving out people's names and things like that, what are they saying? What are they concerned about?
Well, I think primarily they have the same question that I have. Why are we paying someone who quit to go pursue a quote-unquote better opportunity?
Right.
Why are we paying him? And I have the same question. If I have no issues with Mr. Schomer moving on and pursuing better opportunities in his life, that's great. But if you're going to quit, walk away, and resign, I don't really feel that a package coming back to you is appropriate. Now, if he had been let go, which is quite honestly what I believed was going to happen, which is why there was the discussion of that, because if we were to let go without cause, we would owe all that anyway. So when I received that information from our attorney, my assumption was, oh, okay, well, this is what he's going to get, so we're just kind of pre-calculating this, and this is what it's going to cost us to let him go.
So the settlement or the money that
severance package.
The severance package, there we go. That was, in your opinion, that was because you guys were going to part ways with the former city manager. That was part of
Correct.
that, which is
that was it.
Is usually how things are done.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, that is typically how things are done, especially in executive positions. If a company, or in our case, a municipality, decides to let go a higher level employee that's under contract, typically there are clauses within that contract that require certain severance packages if they're let go prior to the end of their agreement. So there was no surprise with the numbers being thrown out. There was no surprise with that type of discussion for me. But again, that was under the assumption that we were releasing the city manager, not that he was leaving on his own accord to pursue better opportunities.
Earlier in the podcast, I spoke to Mr. Frank Wylie, who's a resident, but he's also running for city council, Ward 3. You are running for mayor. Yes. And I didn't ask Mr. Wylie this question, but because it was going on his opinion. Does this have your disagreement in this situation? Is this anything to do with the campaign, the election, anything like that?
If anybody looks at my history when it comes to things like this, they would know it has nothing to do with this campaign. It is simply me questioning a process that I didn't feel was handled properly.
I will say this.
It's not the first I've done this. It won't be the last.
It's not, because this is my opinion for all those listening, you've always been an advocate for the citizens of Huber Heights. You haven't been a perfect council person, but who is, right?
Right.
You've even gotten trouble, per se, brought to the floor for helping residents deal with issues.
Correct.
So I just wanted to point that out. What do you think is going to happen Tuesday? Do you think there's going to be a transparent piece to all of this? Do you think the residents of Huber Heights will get the answers they deserve?
I hope so. It's my goal to have a very open, very public discussion about what transpired, how things went down, and ultimately how we got to where we were. I would like to know what things, if any, were pre-planned, because it feels that way in a lot of ways. I would like to know where people's minds maybe changed or went a different direction during this process, because they did. Yeah, I personally want to know exactly how this was allowed to transpire.
I don't know,
because it just shouldn't have happened this way.
I don't know if it shouldn't have. You're correct. I think a lot of the residents, I'm reading things, I'm hearing things. I still have a lot of contacts in the city of Huber Heights, and there's a lot of folks that are upset about this situation.
Rightly so.
I don't know if you guys have subpoena power or anything like that, but it may be, for the residents, it may be something to think about, to invite the former city manager to, they do it in Congress. I don't know how it works at city council with something like that, to bring someone in to testify who's a former employee of the city to clear things up. I don't know what you would think about that or how that would work, but it's an idea. What are your thoughts about that?
I'm open to any and all options if available. I think that we should put everything on the table, and anything we can use, we should. I don't know if that is any type of possibility or anything like that exists at the level of a municipality versus federal or state level.
Right.
I don't know how that would work, quite honestly.
What would you like to see happen at this point?
That is a great question. At this point, it's my opinion that based on what's been reported, what I've seen, what I've heard, I certainly don't feel that we should be paying out that kind of severance package, with all things considered. It feels to me to have been very, I don't know what's the word for it, but very non-transparent.
That's a good word.
Yeah, and it just, that would probably be a start for me, would be to looking to reel back that cash offer, because if he's leaving on his own volition and It's to pursue a greater opportunity. And the contract specifically states that if he submits a resignation, if he resigns, there is zero payout. There's no payout for a resignation. The contract specifically states that. Again, we have received a resignation, and within the resignation, it mentioned the opportunity. So with that being said, it certainly makes sense to me that there should be nothing due. So at the very least, I would like to see the people of Huber Heights keep their hard-earned money.
Right.
And to a comment that you made earlier, the people of Huber Heights are concerned, and truth is they are the most important thing. This government doesn't exist without them. But I think a lot of people in government forget that on a regular basis.
Right.
Yeah, I just went ahead and grabbed this so I can specifically read it, but under the terms of his employment agreement, Section 3F, it specifically states resignation or retirement by Schomer forfeits any rights of severance under this agreement, except for such rights as would be provided to any city employee upon resignation or retirement pursuant to the city personnel rules, policies, and regulations. Sounds pretty crystal clear to me.
It does.
So I think that'd be a good step to start.
So
I wish Mr. Schomer the best. He can move on with his life and do whatever he pleases, but I don't feel that the residents of Huber Heights, rather, owe him any money.
So what do you plan for Tuesday? Do you have a plan for Tuesday? What are your thoughts for upcoming? Do you believe that the mayor's going to allow discussion? He did not allow discussion today. There were several council members, or a couple, I should say. Councilman Don Webb, who cut Mr. Shaw off. Miss Burge, who also was in that camp, I would say, the camp that did not want to discuss this.
Right.
What are your plans? Do you believe Mr. Gore's going to allow discussion on this on Tuesday, or defer this even further?
That's a great question. Multiple times seen him limit or stop discussion.
We all have.
Members of council and residents. So I don't know. I did have residents after the meeting ask me this evening if they would be able to speak on Tuesday. To which I told them, well, it's a work session, so we don't have you can't really fill out a request to speak at a work session. However, when the agenda item comes up, you can certainly ask to speak, and that would entirely be up to the mayor whether or not he wants to allow that.
So that goes out to all the listeners of Truman's Town Hall podcast right now. If you're at the meeting, ask to speak. That's coming from me, Matt Truman, but ask to speak at this meeting.
I'd love to see a lot of folks come out to speak their mind on this.
Mr. Otto, thank you for joining us on Truman's Town Hall.
It's my pleasure, Matt. Anytime.
All right. So, guys, what do you think? We talked to a couple folks. We talked to a resident who was in council chambers. We talked to a council member who is at the forefront of this entire ordeal and discussion. Now, I'm going to play something real quick, because this would be a question for you, the residents, to ask. Okay, just one of many, obviously, but this would be a question. I'm going to play this short little clip, and then we'll come back and discuss it.
Okay, so it is now 7:45, and we have come out of executive session. And based on the discussion, I would entertain a motion to direct the city law director to execute a resignation and consultation agreement of City Manager Rob Schomer for a total of $150,000 for that agreement.
Okay, so they came out of executive session. They went in the back and they discussed something. So when they come out, they can't discuss without voting on it. They can't discuss what happened in executive session. So they came out and they voted on it. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. What I think someone needs to ask, whether they allow discussion from the residents at the work session, you guys can still sign up to speak at citizens' comments during a city council meeting. If they deny you the right to speak at this next work session, if they deny you a discussion between council members to get to the bottom of what happened, you should sign up to speak openly and publicly at the next city council meeting. That would be my advice. Anyway, what you could ask them is this. If you get an opportunity, if they come back from being less transparent, let's be kind, right? If they come back and they decide that, okay, we're going to allow citizens to ask questions during the work session so we can, alleviate some of the confusion that folks have. Ask them to release the discussion that happened in the executive session so you folks know exactly what was discussed back there. They can do it. They can all vote on it to let you guys know what was discussed back there. Whatever city council members are listening to this, you could call for that yourself. Call for it in a statement on your websites. Call for it on a statement on your Facebook pages. Say it at the work session. Whatever. You guys can release what happened back there. Get the folks to vote for it and release what happened in the executive session, because the people need to know. After the executive session, this happened.
Okay, so it is now 7:45, and we have come out of executive session. And based on the discussion, I would entertain a motion to direct the city law director to execute a resignation and consultation agreement of City Manager Rob Schomer for a total of $150,000 for that agreement. Is there a motion? Mrs. Baker motions. Is there a second? Mr. Hill? Second. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Lyons.
Okay, so this is from March 8th, the March 8th city council meeting that happened Monday. All of this. They went to executive session. They came out of executive session. They began the voting process where there is a portion of it that you can have a discussion. And as you heard, no one needed discussion. If it's me and I come out of an executive session, let's just pretend, right? And I'm confused in there, and I don't know what's going on, I'm going to ask all the questions I can. So maybe they asked them all in executive sessions, and they were lied to in there. That's why it needs to be released. Because if they were told this is a mutual separation, then what other folks are saying is not true. If they were told that this was a mutual separation and in a back room somewhere there was a deal cut to fire the city manager, but make it look like something else so everybody saves face, at least on the higher echelon of this, then something's wrong with that. So all this needs worked out, obviously. So whatever happened in that executive session needs to be released. I hope you guys call on that. Let's go to, during this vote, March 8th meeting, Monday, when I was watching it, and I've watched a few meetings, and these hybrid meetings they're not real good because people, what'd you say? I can't hear you. Is your mic on? I lost connection. It's terrible. They all need to be in city council chambers, but that's for another day. Everybody who's doing this remote, wah. Pay attention, Huber Heights. Anyway, Mr. Lyons was doing it remote. Mr. Lyons, go to the meeting. But he had an interesting pause during the vote, and I thought it was something going wrong with the system again. I thought he couldn't understand or could hear it, but he could. And he was looking at something. He was taking his time on the vote. So let's listen to that.
Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Lyons.
He's just staring at the camera. He must be looking at his
Lyons,
computer
did you hear
reading
me?
something.
Yes, I did.
He's typing through his computer here.
Yes.
Okay. So there was the vote. Yes, 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 on down the line. And you witnessed Mr. Lyons' lengthy pause. And I apologize for interrupting it. But dead air. I mean, who wants to listen to that? So after the vote, we got to play something else. We're breaking down the game tape here. Okay? We heard opinion earlier. Now we're breaking down the game tape and kind of really looking at it. So listen to what the mayor says after the vote.
Yes.
Mr. Otto.
Yes.
And the motion carries 8-0. I'd ask Mr. McDonald if you would get with Mr. Schomer as quickly as possible to execute those agreements. His resignation is effective upon the execution of that agreement. There will be a special city council meeting called within the next 48 hours, within 24 hours of the execution of that agreement, to name an interim city manager, and we will move forward from there.
Okay, so this was the end of the meeting. Did you hear that? We're going to have the city attorney get with the former city manager, and once the agreement is signed, it's effective. He said it right there on the dais. That was his parting words. Now here's where the question lies and why folks need to have city council release what happened back in the executive session. Is because, was that said in executive session? Did they know that once it was signed? Because if they didn't know and that was slipped in at the end, that's very telling, ladies and gentlemen. That would be very telling. But if it wasn't, if they knew that, my friends, is also very telling. And I think we'll have to reverse course on initial thoughts. Right now, I think that there's something fishy in the land of Denmark with your current mayor. I think something happened, and it needs to be brought forth to the people that he represents. And if it's not fishy, it needs to be brought forth to the people that he represents, so it doesn't appear to be fishy. So this fire doesn't erupt every time a major decision happens in the city of Huber Heights. Why is there always this ire of scandal wrapped around the city of Huber Heights? It has got to stop. All right, so the special meeting came, and that's what we were discussing earlier with Mr. Wylie and Mr. Otto. Let's listen to just a few items from that.
Mr. Rogers, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Shaw. Here. Ms. Baker? Here. Mr. Campbell? Here. Mrs. Burge?
We can't hear Tony.
Turn up the volume. Come on, we got to do something light here, right? All right. Let's listen to this. We'll listen to Mr. Otto's quick comments. If you guys really want to watch the whole thing through and through, you know where to go. hhoh.org, Truman's Town Hall podcast page.
Next up is item number 3, which is our only item on the agenda this evening for the special meeting, which is item 3A. Mr. Rogers, if you'd read, please.
Item 3A, an ordinance appointing Scott Falkowski to the position of interim city manager of the city of Huber Heights and declaring an emergency at the first reading.
Is there a motion? Ms. Baker, is there a second? Mr. Webb?
Second.
Mr. Hill, second? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Mr. Otto?
Yeah, I think before we go through this and make this appointment, I have no qualms with the appointment of our chosen interim city manager, but I think we need to have a public discussion about how we got to this place. I've gotten a lot of
feedback and contact from members of our community, residents, and a lot of people are very confused about what's going on. To be quite honest with you, there are members of this council that are a bit confused about what's going on and how we got here. So, again, I'd like to open up a discussion to talk about how we got here. What exactly is the status of Mr. Schomer's release, we'll call it that, and how we ended up after discussions on Monday evening, and what I believed was going to be what I believed was instructions to our law director to handle the agreement, write the agreement, negotiate the agreement, and then meet with Mr. Schomer and bring it back to us. And it appears that the agreement's just done. So I just kind of want to know, because I was under a different understanding when we went into this, that we were releasing our city manager, not that he has found better opportunities and was moving on from our city. And if he's found better opportunities and is moving on, then we certainly don't owe him any type of severance, in my opinion.
So I would say I don't believe this is the reason that we're here this evening to discuss this. The item on the agenda is the specific to the appointment of an interim city manager at this point.
That's correct, but this is absolutely germane to this discussion, though. We wouldn't be in this position if not for our past city. We'll just say Rob Schomer's leaving. So, again, I was under an understanding that this was going to be a release that wasn't, we were negotiating a release, but I was completely unaware that there were other opportunities and that he was freely resigning to pursue additional opportunities. If that were the case, I certainly wouldn't have agreed to a severance package of any sort. So I just want to make it clear that I feel like that there was a little bit of a bait and switch going on. I don't appreciate it. I feel kind of run over, and I know a lot of the residents of our community feel the same way. And I'll leave it at that.
Any other discussion?
Okay, so that was from the special city council meeting, the special hybrid city council meeting, March 10th, 2021. I believe what Mr. Otto was referring to in there, and you'll have to ask him. I probably should have asked him while he was on here, but I didn't. In the Dayton Daily News did an article. It was written by Eileen McClory. And in this article, it says, Gore told the Dayton Daily News that Schomer offered his resignation to the city Monday night, citing new opportunities that have opened to him personally. Was that discussed in the executive session? Question. In the Daily News article, Glenn Otto was quoted as saying, without getting into detail, I'll simply say that I believe the situation to be one of council and the manager had some disagreements. And that was the reason for the end of the relationship. I know that's very overly broad, but that's most of what was said. So, which is it? I think this needs to be cleared up. They eliminated discussion on the 10th. They didn't discuss anything on the 8th. That was all kept in the back doors. Now on Tuesday, March 16th, will they discuss this situation and be transparent, be open to the residents who pay your salary, who gave you your raise? Huber Heights City Council owes it to the people to be honest on this subject and going forward on every subject. They like to hide behind this facade that they can't be honest with you because the people can't handle it. We have to make, you elected us to make all the decisions. You just shut your mouth and let us make the decisions. Don't question it. I don't know. Hopefully you guys go there. How many of these scandals are you guys going to put up with? How many? How many times are you going to let Mr. Gore shut down discussion? And then his friend, Mr. Webb, shut down discussion. And Miss Bird shut down discussion. They only want to talk about what they want to talk about. That's my opinion. That's my opinion. We'll see. Maybe we'll have to come back on here and say, okay, they were transparent. And I hope they are. You guys deserve it. But you also have to stand up and take it. That's your government. Right now, they feel like they have the upper hand. And if they didn't, they would have been honest with you guys. They wouldn't be going through this. They wouldn't be having backroom meetings. We talked about it earlier. Were there meetings that happened outside of the executive session? Question that. It's important, guys. You've got to have an honest, open, transparent city government. There are folks running. Get to know them. You know the ones sitting on council now. You know them. Get to know the folks not sitting on city council. Do they have integrity? Are they honest? Will they be transparent? Will they commit to you as the citizens of Huber Heights to be transparent, open, honest, and get away from all this craziness that the Dayton Daily News picks up, that, the Truman's Town Hall podcast picks up? I'd much rather be talking about how Biden's doing as president and how Governor DeWine's doing as governor and all those, I don't know. Hopefully the governor lifts all these silly mandates and then council's forced to go back. Or no, they'll probably stay hybrid because it's for their safety. Anyway, I digress. All right, let's go back in time a little bit. I know we're going long, but you've got to hear this. This is what Mayor Gore said to Truman's Town Hall in 2017. I'm going to move on to some of the current events and maybe get your take on that. The last podcast I had, we talked about the issue with the residency requirement for the city manager. As you know, and as those who are listening may know, in last November, the residents voted to keep the language in the charter that requires the city manager to live within the city of Huber Heights or within 6 months. Now, that's been going on almost a year now. Council hasn't touched it. What are your thoughts on that issue?
I thought the language for that happened this past May. And I think some of that ballot language for the charter was in May on the primary ballot. But I understand. Timing either way. I don't think it's been going on since November. I think it's been since May.
Well, the language for the city manager was November. It wasn't for May. There was other charter amendment language in May, but this specific one with the city manager was November during the presidential election as well.
Okay. The only reason I'm kind of going off of memory is I thought I was at a couple of meetings where a lot of those charter amendments were.
They were. You're right. There were amendments last November, and there were some in May. There was a lot of them, yeah. And that I think is.
But we had some discussions. I know one I attended at the senior center.
Yeah.
We had discussions leading up to that May primary about what that residency requirement meant. So I was just remembering that language being back on the May ballot. But
yes, council's been discussing this for even past the vote to try and figure out what to do and how to go about doing it. That's not going to I don't know, anger the residents and not going to anger. Yeah, so
there's absolutely no doubt that this is a very controversial issue, and I understand 100% the tone of the residents who believe that the city manager should live in the city. And I think that there are so I think that the word should and the word must are very closely related, but I think they are somewhat different.
Okay.
So if someone asks me, should the city manager live in Huber Heights? Absolutely. Right? 100%. City manager should live in the city that they manage. Must the city manager live in the city that he manages? That's what I'm not so sure of.
And I think that, ultimately that decision has to be made. And I think it comes down to that. Is it should or is it must? Now, ultimately my goal is to get together with council, if elected, with council, with staff, and the residents, and get everybody really unified behind one decision, one way or the other. So, what I do know is we've had several city managers in the past who have lived here, and we've gone through several of them. They weren't up to the task of doing what it took to keep their job for whatever reason. So I think we've proven that just because someone lives in the city, who is the city manager, I don't think there's a direct correlation to that meaning they're going to do a better job. They're going to do a great job. If that was the case, we wouldn't have been going through certain city managers in the past.
Mm-hmm.
But should he? Should? Well, of course. Of course the city manager should live in the city to manage. But must? I still don't know how that court ruling all lays out and what that means from a legal perspective of what we're allowed to do, what we're not allowed to enforce. But I think a decision on that needs to happen, whether we need an outside court opinion, that whether Rob is an employee or whether Rob is a executive officer, or what those clear definitions are. I think that decision has to be made that leads us to a final decision.
Right. And I would like, I don't, and I think last podcast, I made it clear. I've made it clear through the charter review and yada, yada, yada. I don't want to be on a person. I want it to be on a position. That's what I hope. No matter what decision is made, let's make it about the position, not about the person. If we can do that.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And I think, ultimately, I think the decision will be made and should be made about the position.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he, my opinion.
Okay. If you guys want to hear more of that, I'll post a link in the description of this podcast, and you guys can listen to that entire episode back in 2017 when I interviewed at the time, candidate for Mayor Jeff Gore on Truman's Town Hall. And we talked all about the city manager and everything. Now, let's play one last clip. The vote to do a resignation, then rehire the city manager and give a new contract, which is the contract folks are going to be debating now. Let's go to that vote. I think that vote's very, very important. Let's listen to that from January 8th, 2018.
Item 11, we have pending business. Tony, if you would read the resolution, please.
Yes, item 11A, a resolution directing the mayor to sign the agreement regarding the retirement and rehiring of Robert Schomer as city manager of the city of Huber Heights at the third reading.
Okay, I'll call on Tony again for some comments.
Yes, this is an item that's been under consideration by council. It's now at the third reading. There is a proposed amended Exhibit A that's been presented and distributed and publicly noticed as part of the meeting packet. Some of that coming from your suggestions, Mayor, at the last council work session. So that's available for consideration by council tonight and open to discussion by council this evening.
Okay, so at the work session, it was recommended that we amend Exhibit A into the contract and adopt this item this evening. And from my perspective, based on the presentation I made at the work session and the items that I'd like to see amended in that contract, I would like to see this adopted this evening so we can finally put this matter to bed, and as a council and a staff, we can move forward. Mr. Campbell?
Be a move to amend first.
We need to amend. Move to amend. Okay. Is there a second? Councilwoman Burge? Ms. Tony, I think you need to call the roll. Is that correct? Oh, discussion, yes. Yes, Councilwoman Smith.
Thank you. Just so we're clear, in Section 12, does this blanket protection that the city is going to provide the city manager for any litigations past or present that are groundless or otherwise also pertain to substantiated illegal or unethical acts?
Mr. McDonald? Yep. Okay.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Absolutely. In Section 12, does the blanket protection that the city is going to provide to the city manager for any litigations past or present that are groundless or otherwise also pertain to substantiated illegal or unethical acts?
No, that provision would be to pay for claims made by third parties against the city manager in his role as city manager. If it was an ethics type of violation, that would not be the type of item that would fall under that type of indemnification.
So can you tell me where that is in this revised contract?
Well, first, that's the same language that we had. That wasn't new. Well, we are indemnifying him against anything brought in connection with a governmental or proprietary function.
And if that's my decision, I would overrule that, and I would like to get back to the motion that's on the table. So is there any other discussion above and beyond what we talked about at the work session? Okay, so there's been a motion and a second to amend. Tony, please call the roll.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mrs. Burge.
Yes.
Mr. Otto.
Yes.
Mr. Lyons.
Yes.
Mr. Hill.
Yes.
Mrs. Smith.
No.
Mr. Shaw.
Yes.
Okay, and motion passes 7-1 on the amendment.
Move to adopt.
Okay, there's been a move to adopt.
Second.
Councilman Campbell seconded. Discussion on the adoption? Seeing none, Tony, please call the roll.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mrs. Burge.
Yes.
Mr. Otto.
No.
Mr. Lyons.
Yes.
Mr. Hill.
Yes.
Mrs. Smith.
No.
Mr. Shaw.
No.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
And the motion passes 5-3.
And there you have it. If you want to watch the full video, you can go over to Truman's Town Hall Podcast Facebook page and check it out. It's titled Flashback, January 8th, 2018. And it's a look back at that whole deal then. There was a big thing with that city manager from like 2015 through now. And you had a lot of people going to bat for him, including Mayor Gore. So why is it now that this situation is the way it is? Maybe you'll get your answer on Tuesday. I'm not very optimistic that you will, but maybe you will. Hopefully folks come to that meeting prepared. And when I say folks, I mean council members. And hopefully if they're transparent, I'm not very optimistic on that as well, they'll allow citizens to speak. And if you can't speak, if they don't allow you to speak, like I said, show up at a council meeting, sign up, you get 5 minutes. The gracious lords of Huber give you 5 minutes to speak before their presence as they sit atop their high dais and shine down the law and rake in your money and spend it on whatever they choose. All right, guys, that's it. That's it for me today. It's been a long podcast. I want to thank Mr. Wylie and Mr. Otto for coming on Truman's Town Hall, and Mr. Gore for coming on way back when. Huber Heights, you guys, you got a choice this year. Go ahead. Make a decision. Thank you for downloading this episode. Thank you for sharing with a friend. I will talk to you next time. Get involved. Stay involved.